Elizabeth hate amethysts. Yes, the gemstone for this month was not one of Her Majesty's favorite, although she had a couple of brooches that she wore quite frequently, which featured the gem. She actually perhaps rejected a amethyst tiara that belonged to her grandmother, and also she has a amethyst necklace that she has only worn throughout her 70-year reign one single time. Why is that? And what can we learn about these amethyst pieces that existed and or no longer exist within the British Royal Collection? So let's go ahead and get into this. But if you guys haven't been to Royal Fashion News, we talk about all things fashion and tiaras and glittery diamonds here. So if you guys want to subscribe, that would be fantastic. We are closing in on 50,000 subscribers, so I would love to have you back. Okay, so let's talk about the first piece we have here, which is a Queen Mary's Amethyst Tiara and Parures, which is a whole collection of jewelry. So she wore this when she was the Duchess of York and the Princess of Wales, but it was somewhat a mystery how it came into her collection. However, British Royal Jewels on Instagram did a little deep dive and actually figured out how they ended up in the hands of Queen Mary of Teck for at least a period of time. So they were bequeathed to Queen Mary by Princess Catherine of Württemberg, but it originally came from Queen Charlotte, wife of King George III. And if you might remember, King George III is the one who lost the United States. So some of these amethysts may date back to the 1700s. And so the Princess of Württemberg, Catherine, she was the cousin of Mary's father, the Duke of Teck. And so perhaps some of the pieces, at least the tiara, necklace, and earrings date from 1815, and the ring is from the 19th century, which would also be the 1800s, but we don't have an exact date. And so according to reports, the families were rather close. They were actually had summer homes very close to each other in Switzerland, and Princess Catherine, interestingly, was described as a portly, austere, old widowed princess who had a red, mannish face and habitually dressed in purple or mauve. So that explains why she had the amethyst. And for centuries, this purple gemstone reflected royalty. In fact, although I could not find anything concrete, it is strongly suggested that was in fact illegal for any commoner to own an amethyst. They were reserved in medieval England for those who were knights, royalty, aristocracy. Those are who amethysts were reserved for, and you can imagine that because royal oftentimes is associated with the color of purple. And amethysts were actually quite rare until mines were discovered later in South America, and it obviously has become a very cheap gemstone today. But there are two notable amethysts within the British collection in addition to the ones we're talking about today, and that's the one in the Sovereign Scepter and in the Sovereign's Orb. There are two amethysts in each one of those. They are quite large, and so that is something to note as well. And so Queen Charlotte's daughter married the King of Württemberg, so that's how they ended up in Württemberg from the British collection and then made their way back. And Mary wore it as a young woman before putting it away for a period of time and not wearing it until the 1930s and 40s after her husband had passed away and her son became king. This is probably reflective of the fact that amethyst can be seen as a mourning stone. So it's something that you wear when you are mourning someone, and so it makes sense that she busted it out after obviously her husband died. And so when it comes to how the tiara and this whole collection actually left the British royal family, there's a couple of competing reports. The thoughts that might have been left to Margaret or the Queen Mother and discreetly sold, reportedly, allegedly, perhaps to settle some debts. And it was also apparently offered at one point to Queen Elizabeth, perhaps by the Queen Mother. Again, this is just allegedly. And Queen Elizabeth did not want the piece, which is very odd because there aren't really any other amethysts in the British collection. So it's not like she had some already because she could go, oh no, I don't need those. She actually only had really one necklace and a couple of brooches and a comb, which we'll get to. And it was eventually sold probably for private sale. It was definitely not a public option and ended up being purchased by Ronald Furrer for his wife. It was then later sold in 1993 by Sotheby's for £55,357. And then the Amethyst Tiara and Parure were eventually sold at the London Grosvenor's House Antiquities Fair for £150,000. So obviously the value increased in that effect. Again, if these were, let's say, emeralds, this thing would probably go for the millions. But amethysts are, again, much cheaper gemstone. Now, it's unknown now who owns this necklace and tiara set. However, Anna Wintour, the editor of Vogue, was actually pictured wearing it at an exhibit at the Victoria and Albert Museum in 2007. So other than that, though, we do not know where it resides. Perhaps Anna Wintour might actually own it. We're not sure. So again, it is interesting that Queen Elizabeth decided not to take this particular tiara. And what's also interesting to consider in terms of amethyst is that Her Majesty didn't even wear them that much except for her brooches, because she had a beautiful and very, very historic set of amethysts within the British collection, and that is the Kent amethyst. It's actually some of the oldest pieces of jewelry within the British royal family. So these are very, very historic pieces. Most of the collection we have came from the time of Queen Mary. But these eventually came into the family via the Duchess of Kent, mother of Queen Victoria, who was the first owner of the set. And so there was a brooch that was part of a demi-parure, and when Queen Victoria died, she left the rest of the collection to the family. So it included a necklace, a pair of hair combs that have never ever been photographed, earrings, and 3 brooches. In her exact 70-year reign and a little change, she only wore this necklace and set one single time. She wore the brooches quite frequently, but the necklace not so much. She wore it when she was in Portugal for the state visit in 1984. And the brooches we did see on her, like I said, more often, and usually though sometimes they were in connection with something that you could consider a mourning event. So she wore it on the anniversary of her ascension, which also marks the day her father died, and to the unveiling of the Princess Diana fountain, which commemorated the life of her late daughter-in-law. So those were a couple of the times that she's worn the brooch. She's obviously worn it more, but it seems like Her Majesty the Queen is not either a fan of amethysts or just simply wants to leave them more for mourning occasions. So it is very interesting to consider. We obviously don't have a ton of amethysts in other royal houses as well. The most notable, of course, would be the Swedes, who have the Napoleonic Amethyst Tiara, which is an amazing piece and was actually made from a necklace dating back to the time of Emperor Napoleon. So it is quite an old piece and one of the most historic and grand, you could say, even in the Swedish collection. So, but unfortunately, when it comes to the Brits, there is no amethyst tiara. Do you think they should have one? What do you think? Would you like to see this tiara be busted out again? Hopefully maybe at an auction sometime soon. Let me know in the comments down below. Thank you so much for watching, and I look forward to seeing you again soon. Bye.
We don't count the carats, we count the centuries.